Okay, hi, I'm Jim Lake, Vice President of Training here at Viking. Welcome to another edition of Tech Talks. I'm with Shaun Kramer and James Golinveaux. Today we're going to focus on kind of another special topic that just recently kind of has impacted the industry, and that is the revisions to FM data sheet 8-9. And so they're pretty significant. The edition was changed, the revisions came out in July, and we've been kind of digesting them as we go along. But what we're going to focus on today really, because there were some major revisions, I really do think that kind of FM undersold it when they just said in their scope of their changes that they updated the tables. I think that was a little bit of a understatement. But so what we're going to do is today we're going to look at 5 different areas where these changes really have had a big impact on the industry. The first one is moving the 45-foot ceiling height only protection option from tables 2, 3, 5, 7, and 8 up into table 17B of FM data sheet 8-9. We're going to look at the impact of reducing the number of design sprinklers from 12 to either 9 or 10 in tables 2 through 11. Then we're going to look at this thing called the shape factor, which has a big impact on system design. And that's found in, actually, we're going to reach over and talk a little bit maybe about FM data sheet 3-0 on hydraulic calculations. Then we'll come back and look at the January and July revisions of this year to table 17B and their impact, and how a shape factor actually comes into play there as well. And then we'll go through a few examples. Sean's run some calculations and a few examples of exactly what it looks like and what the actual impact has been of FMDS 8-9 when calculating system design. So the first thing we'll go to, and James, you kind of have done a little bit of research on this as well, both in your long history with this data sheet, but also with table 17B. Let's start with that particular. Let's start with the impact of moving the 45-foot ceiling only, taking it completely out of those other tables and into 17B. So you've identified 3 different areas where this impacts. Why don't you explain to us a little bit what those 3 major areas are in that impact?
Yeah, and thank you. And before I jump straight into 17B, one of the reasons of making this session is this change to FM 8-9 and the quote ESFR or storage pendant quick response sprinklers or upright quick response sprinklers in the storage category is the most significant change really since ESFR was developed by FM. So it highlights as just an update to the tables, but changing these 12 sprinkler designs to 9 or 10, and also moving the 45-foot protection criteria over to 17B are very significant, and the impact is great to our customers. And the point of doing these presentations is that we're informing our customers of the let the buyer beware. There are significant changes, and they should know about these so they don't get caught by them. And it's not only just an FM requirement of FM standards within the FM insurance program, but there are other agencies that require FM criteria, FM approval, FM design specifications, so that they have insurance flexibility down the road. And people need to be aware of these changes because they directly conflict with NFPA 13. If you say of the past that FM 8-9 is usually a layer above, more conservative, and you always had a factor as a contractor for complying with FM, and it was usually a multiple factor that you said, okay, if I have to comply with FM, it's going to be 20% or 30%, whatever the number was at the time. But this is a significant change where you really need to understand all of these new design protocols when it comes to deflector distance, when it comes to a number of sprinklers in the design area, the shape factor of the hydraulic remote area, and which sprinkler you're going to use, because it has significantly changed. But With
Okay.
that lead in,
With that lead in, now
go-
can we get to that question
Now
that
I'll
we
go
were
to your
asking?
question. So moving 45 feet, the significance of moving the 45-foot ceiling-only option from tables, you had the number
Yeah,
2, 3,
3,
5,
5.
7, and 8.
Right.
Those are the tables in the FM 8-9 that had a 45-foot ceiling application, is significant in two factors. Number one, if the data is in those tables, it has a deflector criteria or an operating element criteria of 13 inches or 17 inches
Right.
because it's in tables 2, 3, 5, 7, and 8. Moving it to table 17B changes that.
Right.
So it's not automatic anymore that you can go to 17 inches to your operating element for a 45-foot ceiling.
Some of-
That's going to change.
Some of them are restricted to 13 to K22, for
Correct.
example. Yeah.
So
Okay.
there's specific design criteria, and we'll get to the penalty factor to go to a 17-inch
Right.
operating element in table 17B. We'll get to that. But that's the first significant factor. The second significant factor is the type of rack storage protected. So as you can see in table 17B, the storage being protected is solid pile, palletized, bin box, shelves, single row rack, and double row rack. And blatantly missing is multiple row
Multiple
rack.
rows, right.
So in the FM system, moving the 45 feet from the previous tables 2, 3, 5, 7, whatever
We'll
those
just
numbers
refer to
are.
the previous
The
tables.
previous tables. I usually call them 2 through 11, but then I found out not
Not all
all
of
the
them,
tables
right.
had 45 feet.
Yeah.
But for now, we'll just call them 2 through 11. But in those previous tables, it had multiple row rack. So the issue of a 4-foot aisle was not an issue. If you had a box in a protection scheme at 45 feet, it had multiple row racks, it had single row racks and double row racks. And the big differentiator of the two is that if the aisle or flue is greater than 24 inches, it's no longer a multiple row rack, it's either a single row or
Right.
a double row.
Right.
Because the aisle width is 24 inches in FM, where it used to be 3.5 feet in NFPA.
Yep. Yep.
So we used to have down to 3.5 feet, it would be single row or double row, and anything less than that would be considered multiple row.
Right.
But not in the FM document. So in the FM document, you are single or double row as long as you have an aisle. And if the aisle's greater than 24 inches, that's fine, you're a single or you're a double row rack.
Right.
If it's less than 24 inches, then it's a flue, and you're a multiple row rack.
Right.
So the significance of losing it in tables 2 through 11 and going over to 17B is 17B has very specific aisle requirements. So for the K22 and the K25 and the K28 for the 50-foot application, also the K33, it has a 6-foot aisle
6-foot
limitation.
aisle.
So the first thing is there's a gap that we don't have multiple row in table 17B as of yet.
Right.
We'll see if that ever comes around or whether we can test it in there.
Right.
But the second thing is that with a 6-foot minimum aisle, that means there's also a significant gap if you ever were to get to multiple row between the 6 feet and the 2-foot aisle of multiple row. So where we had multiple row and 4-foot aisles at 45-foot ceilings, we don't have that any longer. So key
Right.
point, just
Right.
an absolutely key point, because people design a lot of spec buildings. You know, I want an ESFR system for my spec building. I really don't know who's coming in here. I
Right.
really don't know what the aisles are going to be.
Well, now you do. Yeah, now you're going to have to know.
Exactly. So if
So-
you're at 45 feet up through 50 feet, for an example, and even through 55, you're going to have an aisle limitation right now of
Right.
6 feet, if not 8 feet, depending on which sprinkler you're using and which application. That can be easily accommodated if you know about it in advance, but it's really hard to fix after the fact.
Yeah.
So if someone comes into the building, builds 4-foot aisles, someone reads the table to what the design was done, you know, the installing contractor or whoever specified the building could be in a world of hurt. So two things to consider that are right off the bat is The deflector distance is now going to have very specific criteria in Table 17B as compared to Tables 2 through 11, where it was a default. Any K22 or K25 larger had a 17-inch operating element deflector or a distance from the ceiling criteria. The multiple row rack being a significant factor, and then the hydraulic remote area. The shape factor to the hydraulic remote area. And I know we'll talk about more of that later, but there's an advantage of 17B in calculating the 9 and the 10 sprinkler designs that doesn't apply to tables 2 through 11, which use another standard for determining your hydraulic area.
Right.
So 17B is a new table, some great applications, goes up to 55 feet, but they pulled 45 feet from 2 through 11, moved it over to 17B, which significantly impacts our customers. How's that for a short answer?
Boy, there's a short answer. Let's go to reducing the number, the second topic here, the reducing the number of sprinklers in the design area, tables 2 through 11. I don't know, Shaun, maybe you want to comment on this one, that basically it's all gone now. It's not just the 45, but we changed some other, there were some new rows that came in, some new heights that came in. So, why don't you hit some of the high notes there as far as what differences now in the old, we'll refer to it the January 2020 and the July 2020 revisions to those tables, 2 through 11, we'll call them.
Well, in the old tables, you would see the 12 sprinkler design still being used, and even though you went over to 3-0, in that case, you'd still, most of the time, end up with your 4 sprinklers on the 3 most remote branch lines. Now it's been taken away in tables 2 through 11 for anything over 40 feet, as we already mentioned. There's also been provisions for eliminating 8 feet, 12 feet, even 35 feet in some examples. So in this case, if you're over 30 feet, you automatically have to go up to 40 feet now in this situation. And we can also see that with the table revisions, now instead of the 12 sprinkler design, we're going to the 9 or 10 sprinkler design in most of the scenarios.
Okay.
So in that case, that's where we get into 3-0, which we'll look at a little bit later and see how that's going to affect how many sprinklers you might have to calculate on a branch line outside of the old 4 sprinklers on the 3 most remote branch lines.
Okay. So that, the impact there is obvious by reducing the number of sprinklers, the pressures of those sprinklers. I mean, we are reducing system demand. I mean, that's just a question of hydraulics. That's one of the big impacts, is that's changed a lot. Let's move over. I mean, both of you have mentioned.
One other thing in
Sure.
the change in the tables is that the upright ESFR lost a little bit of its protection criteria because it dropped, for an example, in Table 8, it dropped to 25-foot ceilings, where it used to be at 30-foot ceilings.
Oh, that's a hidden one, yeah.
In some applications, I believe it even went to 35-foot ceilings. But it has dropped down to 25-foot ceilings for many applications.
Okay. All righty. So each one of you have mentioned this shape factor. So let's move along into that one. That the kind of the history of the shape factor, or the reason that we have one, and in some ways, NFPA 13 and FM 8-9 have been similar in their shaping and the way we shape a hydraulically most remote area, whether it's an occupancy hazard classification approach or it's the storage approach. It's been, it's a rectangular shape with the longer edge of the rectangle 1.2 times the square root of the area, and you're including all of the sprinklers there. Well, that was all kind of in a number of different, the history with the FM documents is that's been kind of the 12 sprinkler and the shape factor, 4 sprinklers on 3 branch lines have been actually in the early 2000s. It was in 2-2, data sheet 2-2 for the installation rules. 2-8N, which was actually the installation sprinkler rules, kind of, it was NFPA 13 actually, that FM had adopted, and then 3-0 for hydraulics, and it was in 8-9 for storage commodities. So, or 3-0 for hydraulics actually made reference to 2-8N, which got you to the 12 sprinklers, 4 on 3 branch lines. as time went by, and after 2010, when some of them when those documents 2-2, 2-8N, 2-7 all got folded into either 3-0 or 8-9, we wound up with 3-0 coming up with equations that help you shape the demand, look at the demand area, then shape the demand area. Equation 12 is that safety, is where the shape factor comes into play. And then 8-9 simply said, go see 3-0.
Right.
All right, and this was from 2010 up to most recent. That's why with these shape factors now coming into play in 17B, with the revisions to 17B, suddenly that occurred earlier this year, now it changed again. So it wasn't just 3-0 anymore that had this. But so equation 12, show equation 12 here on the screen. We'll come up with it, and it's the the Norsbull formula. It's a number of what is that? The number Norsbull. The number of required sprinklers per branch line, which greatly affects the branch line size.
Yeah.
Okay, the safety factor. So the number on that is the safety factor. I'll let you guys go through kind of it more,
Yeah,
but
let me jump in with a kind of a historical. You went through the appropriate standards and the time frame, but every once in a while, an old dog can learn new tricks.
Uh-oh.
You know, I've spent a career of knowing storage and teaching storage, and the 4 sprinklers on 3 branch lines was like a default. You just knew it. You knew it was 4 sprinklers on 3 branch lines. That's what it is in NFPA 13. By the time you do the formula for 12 sprinklers, in most spacing applications, it is 4 sprinklers on 3 branch lines. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but then I heard a couple of customers tell me that, hey, I had somebody enforce 3-0 on me.
Oh.
And I had to go to 5 sprinklers on a branch line. And for those of us who do hydraulics, you know how much of an impact going to that 5th sprinkler on the branch line can be.
Yep.
And that could be the difference between 2 to 2.5 or 2.5 to 3 on branch lines, just because you didn't really understand that 3-0 required this formula for how many sprinklers are going to be calculated on a branch line. And I didn't know until this latest revision, when we were trying to calculate the difference between 17B and tables 2 through 11, of how much impact that formula has, not only on the 12 sprinkler designs, you know, it's still hit or miss on the 12, but particularly the 10s and the 9s, it's not the 3-3-3 pattern.
Right.
That's 17B. I know where I'm jumping ahead, but I just assumed it was a default.
Right.
And many of the 10 sprinkler designs go to a 4-4-2, or the 9 sprinkler designs go to a 3-3-3-1, or excuse me, a 4-4-1, or something like that, because of this shape factor.
Right.
And if you're not familiar with 3-0, you're not familiar with the shape factor, it's not there for just ESFR, or just what we know as traditional ESFR. Factory Mutual adopted this in 2010 to establish a shape factor of all the pressure number of sprinkler base calculations. So how do you determine the shape factor? You take the number of sprinklers. You'll see it in 3-0 under the sections that we have in our white paper. But familiarize yourself with that, because if it is enforced and you find out you've got an add a sprinkler per branch line, your estimate, your final design, or worse, your installation may not be to the standard. And I did not recognize this. So in preparing all of this information, and specifically when the change was made to 10 and 9 in tables 2 through 11, that aha moment goes off where, oh my God, this shape factor can completely change the hydraulic characteristics. Because I was under the impression, such as table 17B, where it has its own shape factor. 17B has its own paragraph that regulates its shape factor. You don't go to 3-0 to figure out the hydraulics. But in tables 2 through 11, with this new 9 and 10 sprinkler design protocol, I thought it was sort of a default. And it wasn't. It goes back to 3-0.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I'm looking at how many sprinklers are going to be on a branch line, and instead of what I thought would be 3 or even a 4, turned out to be a 5.
Be a 5.
And I'll get geeky just for a second. Some of us like welded 24-foot lengths of branch line pipe with a 4-foot to an outlet 884. They're typical, you can pick them up in either direction, they're easy to install. You're not getting the full 100 square feet, but it just, you kind of like that spacing to lift up the branch lines and fabricate it. But that 8-foot spacing is so short that that shape factor may pick up that 4th or 5th head on your hydraulic calculations. And I didn't know that before. So it really wasn't highlighted with the 12-head design because it didn't really change it that often. But with 8 and 9, or excuse me, with 9 and 10, it really does,
It has that
it really
impact.
can impact that design.
Yeah, Sean's done a few calculations that later that we'll get to with the examples, but also that it will show in the white paper, where it's not just the impact on the branch lines either, your branch line size, it impacts everything going back, doesn't it?
Yep,
From-
that's
from
correct.
Your secondary and primary main sizes actually jump up too, so everything gets impacted, even though we're only gonna show on the diagrams, right? That,
Yeah, we're just showing the branch lines on the diagrams,
Right.
on the figures that we have, but yeah, the mains were impacted in certain situations as well. Risers stayed consistent, all the parameters for the layout of the calculations were consistent for
Right.
what we used, and once we get to the figures, I'll get into that a little
Right.
bit more to the exact parameters.
get
we
to those
used.
examples, yeah. So you mentioned that there was a shape factor in 17, associated with 17B as well. It's not
Correct.
the Norsbull calculation there, the equation in Sabre 12, but once you, why don't we take a look at 23696, section 23696, as it applies, because there is a shape factor actually involved with 17B, as you had mentioned. So what is that, whereas one, you're doing a calculation to come up with these things,
Correct.
the other one is more prescriptive. I mean, 23696 says you will do X. Based on what, though? Based on ceiling slope?
Section 23696 is specific to Table 17B, which says there's 2 number of design protocol in this table.
Right,
One is 9 and one is 10. And here's how you calculate both of them.
right,
So for ceiling slopes up to, or ceiling independent of ceiling slope.
right.
So up to 5 and 5 up to, I assume, 2, 12, 10. It is a design for 9 of 3 by 3, period.
Period. That doesn't
So
change.
It's across the board. So
Right.
it's 3 by 3, you know what it is, and it's specific in 23696. When you go to 10 sprinklers, now it deals with the ceiling slope. And as a paragraph form, it says, for slopes up to 5 degrees, it's a 3, 3, 3, 1. Okay, easy,
Period.
it's 9
Yep.
plus the 1. For slopes above 5 degrees to their maximum limit, it is 4, 4, and 2. Significant impact to the hydraulics.
Right.
For the above 5 degrees, for the 10 sprinkler. So for 9 sprinklers in Table 17B,
Yeah, it's got to be, that's the
For-
key. You
for
go to
9.
17B, it's a 9 sprinkler
Correct.
design, you can use
You can use
the main
3, 3,
paragraph.
3.
Right,
and that's for both ceiling slopes. For 10 sprinklers, it's either going to be 3, 3, 3, 1, or 4, 4, 2,
right.
depending on the ceiling slope. And that's another one where you just really want to make sure you're getting that right, because that could pick up another sprinkler.
Right.
Could pick up another sprinkler on a branch line. But this is minor impact to that design shape than 2 through 11.
Oh, yeah.
So that formula of number of required sprinklers per branch line for 2 through 11 can sometimes end up with 5 sprinklers on a branch line, even at a 10-head design or a 12-head design. Because there's still some 12s in there, but it really highlighted that difference of what spacing you're using, what your design protocol is, to how many sprinklers you're going to calculate based on that formula.
Okay, so let's explore a little bit deeper the January and July revisions to 17B, because it wasn't but a year ago, actually, October of 2019, that 17B Table 17B was a very straightforward, fairly simple table that basically set up pressures and the number of sprinklers, 12, and it had all of the necessary guidance that you needed. And it was basically when, we started exploring, Viking started testing K-28s and what was the extent that we could change or impact that with our K-28 design that went up a little bit higher all of a sudden, and we explored a lot of other variations and it wound up with a significant change in January of 2020 that really, 17B doesn't look anything almost like it did before, because the K-28 is sitting there, the K-33.6 obviously is there as well, but K-28 has a kind of a dual life to it. It's got a 9 sprinkler design or it's got a 10 sprinkler design and also a 9 sprinkler design. Let's do it that way, because in the table itself, it has a 10 sprinkler design like everything else, but there's that lovely asterisk and note right there that says you can go to 9. So, and that was all based on the testing and work that we had done at FM on that.
Yeah, the history is that FM had revised Table 17B to give the 50-foot ceiling criteria, and they give it to multiple orifice sizes. It was all with a 12 sprinkler design. And pressures range from 50 PSI up to 75 PSI, I believe it was.
Yep.
So it's fine, it looked good, but you gotta sometimes be careful what you ask for. We were doing, Viking was doing 55-foot testing, and we were using our K-28 sprinkler, and we had tremendous success. No matter which fire we burned, we didn't open any more than 5 sprinklers.
That's right.
So with 5 sprinklers with a 50% safety factor, it was a 9 sprinkler design. Had never been done before.
Nope.
So with a 9 sprinkler design, all of a sudden we started looking at, okay, what other products can we do? What other applications can we do? So if we're not calculating 12, and Shaun will give you all the great aspects of hydraulics when you're not calculating 12. But when you drop down to 9, what other applications? So we immediately looked at the 50-foot and said, what can we do down there? And we brought it down to lower pressures than what Factory Mutual was giving us as a default pressure, based on their own analysis, and we did more testing. And we did really well at 40 PSI. So we have a dual criteria at 50-foot ceiling height. So we have a 9 sprinkler design at 55-foot ceilings, and then we have a 9 and a 10 sprinkler design. And what it is you calculate 9, verifying the first 4 will discharge at 80 PSI, and you could stay at 9. You don't have to go to 10.
Right.
If you don't have 80 PSI with the first 4 sprinklers, which you should because it's a default if you're doing the hydraulics, then you'd have to go to a 10 sprinkler design. But we tell most people you're going to have the 80 PSI, so work with the 9 sprinkler design at the 50-foot. And now in looking at that, and we don't know what the catapult was for FM, we have some ideas of why they changed tables 2 through 11 and took away some applications and added some applications, but that's their own business. They're their own standards writer.
Sure.
They're their own insurance carrier, so they can establish their own risk. But we're really pleased that we have 9s and 10 sprinkler designs throughout our product portfolio. But there was a historical change to it. In Tyco, you gotta recognize the K-33 was put in for the 55-foot ceiling with a 9 sprinkler design afterwards, after we had our approval. That came in just right after us. So you give them credit for what they have at 55, but from the 50 and down, including the new 45 that moved over, really that K-28 is a home run product.
Yeah, you take a look at this table we're showing right now, table 3 in the technical article or white paper. You can see that the K-28 is even in the old system demand in the, in October of, well, if you applied it in the October one, or in the January one, actually, you can see that the K-28 is basically just a winner all the way through as far as theoretical. Now, this is just the numbers here. They're going to change a little bit in our examples that Sean's going to run us through, because these are just straight Q equals K times square root of P numbers. But you can see that the K-28 is really got a significant advantage. So the next thing that we wanted to go to, the next point we were going to make is, the impact of 8-9 and getting into some of these examples that Shaun had run. But there's a couple of things. If you just insert, and we've got we built a table here that's kind of a table 17B with the flows, just kind of, I added them on. We'll show them here on the screen. That's not the table itself. I just added that column in on the right to show the advantage and the difference when you're calculating just theoretical flows, when you're calculating, the K, especially the difference in the K-28. But let's,
And just to add to that, though, when you're talking about the 50-foot ceiling, so from 40 to 50, this is your table right now. And the K-28 not only has the 1771 or the 1594, using the 9-head design in
Right.
flow, but it also has 40 PSI, which you'll look at the table, and it's a minimum of a 10 PSI savings,
right,
if not 35 PSI.
starting, yeah.
So that's significant. When you're saving 10, 15 pounds start pressure, and you're saving overall flow,
Yeah.
there's so many hydraulic benefits to that, and Sean's going to talk about that. But this is an important graph to the table that you've added a column to highlight the system demand, the theoretical, the number of heads times the flow.
Right.
Because he'll get into actual hydraulics. But that 40 PSI is huge.
Yeah.
For that branch line savings.
Okay, so let's look at these two examples. We've basically broken this out into two examples. We've taken an example of calculating a system at 40 feet, over 40 feet up to 50. So we'll apply table 17B. And then we've got another one where it's below 40. We got I think it was a 38-foot warehouse we chose, the 38-foot ceiling. So that we're under 40 feet, and still we're going to kind of explore both. So, Shaun, why don't you take us through after the 17B and maybe the shape factors. I know, James, you worked on the table 4 here that showed the application of 23696 on that, but and we can get into the figures. I'm not sure exactly which order you want to do it, but you started off with a design or with a challenge of, all right, show me the 4 sprinklers, K22, K25, K28s, and K33s, and the configuration. So once you run us through the figures, I think it'll play back and forth on the table. It's kind of hard to figure out which one should come first, chicken or the egg on this one. But
Before he gets into the hydraulics, I'll start with the first table, and then he can go into the
Sure,
effect of it.
sure.
The first thing you need to do is establish how many sprinklers you're going to calculate based on the table,
Right,
17B, that
17B.
says 9 or 10. So as we stated before, it says 9 sprinkler design, so you automatically know if you were looking at the K28, that it's a 333
right,
requirement.
Right.
Whether it's 10-foot spacing on the branch lines or
Or-
8-foot spacing on the branch lines, it's a 333.
Right.
Because the paragraph
and
doesn't
that's what table
refer
4
you
is
back.
showing.
Yeah.
Right, table 4 is
So
showing you
table
that.
4 is showing you that what example he's going to use when you're looking at a 9 sprinkler criteria for the K28, for an example, for ceilings up to 50 feet, using the 9 sprinkler option, and everything else is at a 10, for the K25 and the K22, the 10 is going to have a 3331 at best case, or even worst case, a 442. So depending on ceiling slope.
Yeah,
So if you look at these tables that are in front of you, you can see which sprinkler you're selecting to whether you're going to have a 333 or even possibly a 442, which can dramatically change your hydraulic and your pipe size.
Yeah, we're going to, Shaun proved that when he went through the calc. So using that, now that was, again, because we started with 17B, because we're over 40 feet, we're up to 50-foot ceiling. So we had to start with 17B. We had the prescriptive shape factors based on 23696.
Yep.
So we didn't have any choice. There was no equation. There's nothing in here that modified that we had to do new math or anything on. It was, we were told this was the design. So why don't you walk us through, what we're going to do now is in the white paper, we've got 4 figures that kind of go through the results of actually, not theoretical now, but actually calculating it and where we all wind up. So why don't you walk us through your calc process on this and what you came up with?
So in the figures, we just show the branch lines and the sizes of the branch lines, but what we used for the calculations was a 40,000 square foot grid. At, it would be for table 17B at 50-foot elevation. And we went through and used 175 PSI starting pressure at the base of the riser for the static pressure. Now, when we went through and ran the calculations, as James explained, we went through and ran them for less than a 5-degree slope versus the K28 and the K33.6, because both of them with the 9 sprinkler design, it's not going to change regardless of whether it's,
Right.
less than 5 degrees or greater than 5 degrees. But then we also ran greater than 5 degrees, showing the impact that it would have on the 22K or the 25K in that type of situation. So based upon the 9 sprinkler design at 40 PSI, using the K28 sprinkler, if we look at figure 1 starting there, we'll see that we were able to get down to 2-inch branch lines in that situation just from the figure. But it's even a little bit more significant than that, because not only were we able to get down to 2-inch branch lines, but we also had 2-inch riser nipples. We had a 4-inch primary main and a 4-inch secondary main. So the layout of this grid that we're looking at was 20 branch lines with 25 sprinklers on each branch line, and then 2 outriggers on each side of the mains.
Okay.
So in between the mains, you had 21 sprinklers that you were looking at for the design.
So that's pretty conservative, because that's a lot of sprinklers on a grid.
Yes.
25 in the ESFR category is a pretty big distance between 2 cross mains, so that's a pretty conservative system to use as an example.
Yeah, and what we resulted with, being able to reduce down to the 4-inch mains on both sides and the 2-inch branch lines, with the 9 sprinkler design at the 40 PSI, your overall flow was 1,611 GPM. And each branch line, since it's 3 by 3 by 3, was approximately 537 gallons per minute per branch line. Of course, it varied a little bit because
Yeah.
you got the friction loss through the mains and
Sure.
so on.
Yeah.
But this is just the example.
And it
shown.
splits in both directions, so
Yeah.
you're only carrying half of that going in each direction if it's perfectly balanced. Nothing's perfectly balanced, but
Yeah, right.
only half of it is going. But the key factor of what you're showing is 40 PSI, which is the lowest start pressure, coming away from your 175 at the base of the riser.
Right.
Your elevation's going to be given, but you're only doing half of 537 through your friction loss. You've got a couple of compounding factors that are going to keep working to your advantage.
Yeah, exactly. And if we go to figure 2, now we're taking a look at the 22.4. Once again, this is less than a 5-degree slope.
Right.
So we were able to go with the 3-3-3-1 design.
Right.
And you'll see the.
That's the 10 sprinkler design.
Right, it's the 10,
Yes,
right.
So you
correct,
have
the
to go
10
to the
sprinkler
3-3-3-1.
design. Yep, the
Okay.
10 sprinklers at 63 PSI. So we're looking at 23 PSI more
Gone.
than what's required for the K28 in this example. Now, looking at figure 2, the branch lines were pretty close to the same, but our overall flow was significantly different. With calculating that one additional sprinkler, we're talking about large K-factor ESFR sprinklers flowing almost 200 GPM per sprinkler. So adding an additional sprinkler is pretty significant. And our overall flow came in at 1,810 GPM. So in that situation, what we were looking at is more pressure, more flow. Therefore, you're going to have larger branch lines, larger main sizes in that situation.
Right, your pump curve at a higher flow is going to be lower available pressure. So instead of 1611, you're 1810, so you could have another 5-pound loss just in the curve of the pump, plus the 23 pounds in the start pressure. You're already 28 pounds negative before you start the hydraulics.
Exactly, yep. And
I love
as you
this
can
stuff.
see with
Yeah,
that, it
you-
made significant impact in that situation. If we take a look at the next calculation, now we took the 25.2K factor in figure 3 with still the 10 sprinkler design with the 3x3x3x1. And now we're looking at 50 PSI. So larger K factor, we still have 10 PSI more. It's a little less than the 22K factor for the pressure, but the overall flow came out to 1,817 GPM. So very comparable to the 22K factor, but once again.
Same challenge.
Same
You're right.
challenge against the 28K factor that the 22K factor had, although you were able to reduce the pressure a little bit, just you still had that 10 PSI advantage with the 28K factor. So in this case, we were looking at right around the 22K for the overall flow. Branch line flow was about the same as the 22K factor in this situation. And we still had to go up to the 2.5-inch branch lines and the larger 6x4 main, 6 for the primary,
Right.
4 for the
So
secondary.
in
had
this
10
case, it was
10
10 PSI on the start pressure and a few pounds lost to go to 1,800 gallons versus 16. So you had 200 gallons more, so you lost a few pounds on your hydraulic curve.
Exactly, yep. And going to figure 4, now we start to see where, in this case, we're looking at the 33.6, and it's a 9 sprinkler design, so you have the 3x3x3, but it requires 55 PSI. So now we have a larger K factor than the 28K, as well as we're requiring 15 PSI more start pressure right there.
Wow.
So in this case, if you remember the previous with the K28, it was 1,611 for the calculated flow. Now with the 33.6K factor for the 9 sprinklers at 55 PSI, we're looking at a flow of 2,261 GPM.
600 gallons more.
600
Right,
gallons
correct,
and
yeah,
15
that's pretty
PSI on the
significant.
start pressure. So
And I know a lot of people will go crazy over this. This is sort of a default listing from the 55-foot application that the manufacturer of the K33 has. So
Sure.
this was not their target for 50-foot ceilings,
No.
but
but it's there. I mean,
it is on the table with a 9 sprinkler design. But this would be a real tough one to use for
Oh, yeah.
that ceiling height.
Right.
Okay, so that was with those examples bring us around to the, as far as up to the 5-degree slope.
Correct,
So
yes.
you ran a bunch of calcs too, and I'm going to anticipate the same thing, but we're going to run you through it anyway. We're going to anticipate the same kind of results. Now we're just going to slant that up. We're going to go above 5 degrees, in which case now 23696 says you need to do what? What do we need to change this to?
Anytime you're above 5 degrees and you have that 10 sprinkler design in table 17B, you're looking at the 4x4x2 calculation.
Right.
So now we're adding one additional sprinkler
Yeah.
on the branch lines, on the two most remote branch lines in this situation. So not only is it impacting the overall flow like we saw with less than the 5-degree slope, but it's also now impacting the flow of the branch lines as well on top of it, even more so than it did previously with less than a 5-degree
Even
slope.
though it's still just a 1 sprinkler difference, it's the location of where we're putting those sprinklers,
a huge
you know, where, that has the big impact. Okay.
Yeah, so in figure 5, we just have the same example
1611,
because nothing changed for the K28.
Right.
The K28 remained the same. So we still have the 1611 and 537 gallons per minute per branch line. But now when we go to figure 6 and we take a look at the 22.4, we still have our 10 sprinklers at 63 PSI, but now we have our 4x4x2 design. So in this case, our overall flow increased to 1849, which doesn't seem like that much more than the less than 5-degree slope, which was just a little less than that. But once we go to the branch line flow, now we're looking at 740 gallons
Because we
per
added
minute.
the extra sprinkler onto.
Correct,
Yeah,
yep, on those two most remote branch lines, as compared to 537 GPM when we look at the K28 sprinkler.
Okay.
So as you could see, the branch lines shown are 2.5 inch. The mains came out both needing to be 6 inch for the primary and secondary.
Okay. The same thing looks like it occurred very close, again, very close between the K25 at the reduced, at the lower pressure.
In the same story
In the
with
same
the
story
K33.
with the K33.
Which didn't change at all because it
Right.
was a 9 sprinkler design, but it still has a 2,200 gallon flow.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I mean, even in that situation, it still has the highest flow out of the 4K factors for a 50-foot ceiling.
And keep in mind that these two examples that Shaun has just walked you through, these are all in the 40, above 40 foot.
Right.
To 50-foot design protocol now, mandatory for ceiling-only protection for FM. This is all 6-foot aisles,
Right.
okay? So there's no difference of any aisle spacing at the 50-foot level. So it's all 6-foot aisles, so it's all like product that this hydraulics is being compared to.
Yeah, that's a good catch right there. So we've table 5 then there that we'll show is just kind of a collection of all of that data, just comparing it line by line of what you had shown. The sprinkler branch lines, the pipe sizes and everything, all just kind of collected together into one convenient package.
Yeah, and I want to give a legal disclaimer here. The 2-inch branch line is an example of a system that Shaun has calculated.
Right.
We're not guaranteeing any particular branch line or primary or secondary main, but the point is when you save 10 to 20 pounds on the start pressure and you have a lower flow, the chance of downsizing a branch line or using a smaller branch line is much, much greater. That's the point of the paper. I'm not trying to
Right.
guarantee if you use K28, you have a 2-inch branch line. That's,
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah.
we make no statements.
we're not as
We make
good
no
as that.
statements as that, like that, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the example I picked was just a 40,000 square foot grid. I just went with it. I didn't know it was even gonna turn out this way, but.
I think 25 heads on a branch line is very conservative because a lot of people don't get 25 heads on a branch line because of the friction loss involved with suppression sprinklers. So this 9 sprinkler option brings a lot to the table.
Yes, it does.
to
Yep.
get to these system sizes, where if you wanted a 2-inch branch line with the other products, you'd have to bring your primary and your secondary main closer together and have smaller system sizes,
Right.
or more elongated system sizes and more systems. So
Sure, yep.
there's always a balance factor in hydraulics that everyone has learned how to play, but this is a really conservative example. Well done.
So let's move on to our second one, which is our second example here, which is calculating a system demand for ceiling heights up to 40 feet. Now we're applying, now we're bringing in those tables, the tables 2 through 11, but also 17B still plays a role in this.
Sure.
Because we can use the K28 in protecting this, but we instead of just taking a generic example that you set up, we also set this one up here as a warehouse with a 38-foot ceiling and a 6-degree slope. So, I mean, we kind of, instead of doing both of them, we're focusing in on one particular arrangement. Cartoned unexpanded plastics, and furthermore, just the kind of the design requires an 8 by 10 spacing.
Yeah, in this
as you set it up. So in that particular case, if we take a look at the next table here,
And the
you're
the
limited
eight's
there.
probably a worst-case scenario in this example. Because most people are going to try to get the full 100 square feet, if they can. The reason Shaun and I kind of default to the 4884 is, if you're fabricating pipe and you just want to make pipe that you can lift up in either direction and not have to have a piece 1, piece 2, piece 3, they're all
Sure.
piece 1s and there's 300 of them. Sort of a no-brainer to install. So we're showing it as an example, but it really would be a worst case because a solution to this would be to expand the spacing between the sprinklers to try to change that calculation method.
Okay.
But to go typical, the way a lot of people like to do, we want to show this example to show people the danger of that as well.
Okay. So why don't you walk us through then the kind of your decision process here in the example, figures 6 through 8 in the paper. Just go through and give us a,
Yeah,
actually is
Let me start with the table again, because I started the last one with
Yeah.
the table of selection. And again, table 6 that you're
Right.
looking at is, this is applying now to tables 2 through 11.
right,
And this table uses the FM 3.0 for the shape factor for the hydraulic area. So if you have a 9 or a 10 or even a 12, you have to go to 3.0 if you're in table 2 through 11. You don't get the exception that table 17B has. So in there, and this was my aha moment when someone questioned,
Yep.
you know, and I would have sworn it was a 444 design for 12. And all of a sudden, I go in, I start reading 3.0 that was issued in 2010, and that old dog new trick thing came
Yeah.
out where I was learning something. So in the table, you'll see 9 and 10 and 12 sprinkler designs for less than 5 degrees, and then 9, 10, and 12 sprinkler designs for greater than 5 degrees. Divided into 80 square feet, where you'd go 10, which is the maximum distance between your lines, then the 8 being the default spacing.
Right.
Or if you were to have the advantage of going 10-foot spacing, you're 10 by 10, then what would the number be? And, you know, the 10 by 10 kind of produced that typical 444, what I
Sure.
was familiar with. And see, this is not a problem.
right,
But when I used the 8-foot spacing, all of a sudden, I saw a 552 as a design shape. And I said, this is impossible. It doesn't exist. And sure enough, if you use the formula in 3.0 to
Right.
decide your shape factor. So Shaun has picked 2 examples here where you use a 9 sprinkler design and it's a 441.
right. That's under, then the shape
that's-
factor is 1.2 under 5
That's-
degrees.
That's
Correct.
significant.
Right.
So you have a shape factor and a number, but a key to this is to understand the formula, that it's the actual spacing of the sprinklers on the line. It's not the maximum. See, I used to think it was always the maximum. So if the maximum was 10 feet and I had 40 feet between, you know, my shape area was 40 feet and I had 10-foot spacing maximum, I had 4 sprinklers. So
Right.
regardless of my spacing, I picked 4. And it's not the case. It's not how it's written.
Nope,
It's written that it's the actual spacing. So when it is 8 feet and it's 40, guess what your number
that's
is?
5, yeah.
It's 5.
Sure.
And I have my
Uh-oh.
aha moment,
Yeah.
and I call a few friends, and I said, have you ever heard of this? And they're like, yeah, once or twice, somebody has called us on that. And that's a significant
Yeah,
call.
well, we're going to see that on.
Yeah, so
on that.
you can see by
The impact.
Sean's selection here of his 2 examples, there is a 9 sprinkler design in the 5 degrees, less than 5 degrees, and it's a 441, not a 333. Even though it says 9, we get real familiar with 17B with its own protocol, and we come back to this, and all of a sudden it's a 441. A good design. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a 441.
Right,
So it's good, solid design. But above 5 degrees, you can see from the table 6, it's a 5.4. Well, that 5th sprinkler on that branch line, like what Sean
We're
was
gonna see
saying,
it, yeah.
200 gallons apiece. And you add that 4th and then the 5th,
yeah.
it's significant. So I'm sorry, I love this table because it was my aha moment in storage that it's tough for me to find these days.
So run
that?
through it, yeah, run through, now, yeah, the old dog, the new trick. Show them the impact of the new trick here.
So we just evaluated the 25.2 K factor in this
Yeah.
situation because it had the 9 sprinklers at
Right.
40 PSI, the exact same parameters as the 28K, but as James explained, it's either that 441 for the 9 sprinklers or the 5.4
Right.
if you exceed the 5 degrees based upon the 80 square foot spacing in this example. So looking at the 25.2 K factor, it required a design area flow of 1,487 GPM, and your branch lines for the 2 most remote branch lines were at 661 GPM.
Okay,
Going to the 5.4 design, it gets even more significant.
And this is the shape factor of 1.4, where that's how we're getting here, right?
1.2
Okay.
was the first one,
Yep.
now we're looking at the 1.4.
And this is for a 40-foot ceiling.
This is at 38 feet.
38, yeah, up to 40,
38, yeah,
up to
up to
40.
40
It's the
feet, right.
40-foot design protocol.
Right.
And just before you turn the page, because this is just cool. You have 1,487 gallons, 40 PSI, but you have 2.5-inch branch lines again because of 661 GPM flow per branch line going to that fourth sprinkler. And we sell the K25.
Yep.
And you're showing this example to this tech session and this white paper for people to know how to apply our product properly in the tables 2 through 11.
Sure.
But if you were to bring back the first calculation at 50 feet for the K28 with a 9 sprinkler design,
Yeah, which we do in figure 8.
it actually has similar flow within 100 and something gallons, but the same start pressure, but smaller branch lines because of the flow per branch line. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping to your conclusion, but the only difference that it brings that we have to consider is it brings a 6-foot aisle down into tables 2 through 11. Okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
So the K28 can be used at a 40-foot design protocol as long as you're using the 50-foot design system. It can go down with that design, but it only carries with it that 6 sprinkler design, or the 6-foot aisle space. So if you have it, or plan on it, that could also be an alternative, is to bring 17B down into this area. Sorry, and then,
Yeah.
No?
I just
But
get all
it's-
excited.
But that gets to your point, I think, earlier, that connects to your point earlier about multiple row racks and thing. This is kind of a similar impact
For now,
here. that
until
such
we
things-
figure out multiple row racks for
Right.
17B.
There is an impact here,
There's
yeah.
an impact that you need to consider.
Right.
So go through, I'm sorry, and I
Oh,
jumped on you.
it's-
Yeah, that's all right.
Go ahead.
So when we look at the 1.4 shape factor, now we're still looking at a similar overall flow, 1488 GPM, but now our most remote branch line has 827 gallons per minute coming out of it. So looking at, comparing them to the 28K in the next figure, our design still stays the same as we saw back in 17B, because that's the criteria
Yeah.
we're using, where we only have 537 gallons per minute per branch line, and our 1611 overall flow. So you see the 1611's a little bit higher on the flow here, but as James described, since we're so much lower on the branch lines, we were able to get that reduction in the pipe size
Yeah.
again, as compared to the 25.2K factor going into table 8. So looking at that, what we see is that if we have the 25.2K factor on the 3 branch lines, we're gonna have a lot more flow coming out of it, requiring us to increase up to the 2.5-inch size.
Yeah, and that's where your primary and secondary mains ballooned up too, right? You had
Correct,
a
yes.
6 and a,
6 and a 4 with one of the designs, and then a 6 and a 6 with the other design.
those are
And
big
at-
mains.
Yeah, and at the 827, you're on the edge of going to 3-inch. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah.
You're making up for
You're-
it by probably an 8-inch riser and, your primary, secondary main increases. Someone might even make the decision to go to 3. Now, we've talked about 2.5 down to 2 quite often here, but one thing we haven't mentioned is seismic bracing. So 2.5-inch pipe in the seismic area has to be braced. So when you're installing 2.5 as an ESFR branch line, you've got to provide seismic bracing to that
Right.
branch line.
Right?
Yep.
And it's not just the pipe cost and the coupling cost to go from 2.5 to 2 in all cases. If you're in a seismic zone, this can be significant as well as to the type of hanger that you use and whether you're using restraints and bracing and so
man.
on. So there's another impact to that branch line savings that's pretty big.
When did you come up with that one? That was.
Oh, I just made it up.
Just made it up. I was like, wow, we've been talking about this for a week.
I forgot about the seismic bracing, but I moved
No,
out. I moved
That's
out of,
crucial, though.
I
That's
moved out of
that is-
California about
that's
30 years ago, so it's.
oh, my goodness. Yeah, no, but that's a big
Yes. Yeah.
collateral damage, if you will. I mean, that's a collateral subject that could be easily missed when you're.
But we
when you're-
can't guarantee a 2-inch branch
No,
line.
right.
But we're giving them all the tools, we're giving
Mm-hmm.
the user all the tools using the K28 as compared to our product, the K25. We're not trying to compare ourselves to
No.
competitors. We make the K22. we make the K25, we make the K28.
Right.
But when it comes to supporting our customers and supporting the end users, the K28 is just the logical choice right now.
Yes, sir.
It
Oh,
just
yeah.
makes sense.
Yep.
For a number of reasons. And even above our own K25 and our own K22, or K16.8, or K14. We have them
Okay,
all.
we got them all. So, let's conclude then. The revisions, just kind of in conclusion, and this is where we go with the technical paper, is that, the revisions to January and July 2020 to Factory Mutual Data Sheet 8-9 dramatically changed the way we look at the demands for storage protection. By reducing the number of design sprinklers from 12 to 9 or 10 in tables 2 through 11, it reduces the system demands. That's the second one that we were trying to focus on. The reduction in ceiling heights from 45 to 40 feet in tables 2 through 11 requires the application of the requirements of Table 17B to be applied to any ceiling height above 40 feet now.
Right.
For ceiling heights up to 40, K22, K25 sprinklers must use Table 2 through 11 and apply design criteria and data sheets and apply.
All
Yeah.
the pendant suppression,
Right.
or upright suppression, quick response.
All of them.
Have to
Yeah.
apply. So the
Yeah.
K14s, the K16.8s,
All
the
of them,
22,
yeah.
20, they all do.
So, and with that comes along the shape factor calculations from 3-0. I mean, that's the crucial point there, that any of those now. The application of the shape factor and the demand area required for designs utilizing 22 and 25 sprinkler increases can increase pipe size in the entire system to accommodate. And again, we'll make the disclaimer, no guarantees on 2-inch pipe, we'll just say it again. But clearly, hydraulically, we are, it's an advantage. And designs utilizing the K28 sprinkler are covered in Table 17B with multiple advantages now. I mean, even the new one that we just identified with potentially impacting even your seismic bracing. So there's the hydraulics, the start pressure, the pipe sizes, the total flow demand. I mean, K28 seems to hold the field on this storage area. So before we do that, let's get to any concluding
Yeah.
thoughts that you guys have on
I
that.
know people are reading the table, and, there is one advantage of the K33 over the K28, and that's at 55-foot ceiling, where they have a 6-foot aisle and we have an 8-foot aisle.
Right.
So if that's the advantage, then that's great for the above 50 to 55.
Above 50 feet, right.
Sure.
But from 50 foot down to 40 foot, and even below 40, and the message is, just take a look at it. Take a look at this new design protocol by FM.
Yeah.
And what we tested and what we were bringing to the market. We recommend that you look at the K28 for every ceiling above 35 feet, all the way up to 50. It's just a no-brainer to take a look at, validate it or invalidate it, and figure out which sprinkler best fits for you, but,
And pay attention to that shape factor
yeah,
and your slope.
We're very
ceiling
confident
slope.
that the K28 is going to give it a run for the money.
Yep, great. Sean, any final thoughts from you?
Just going back to the tables that James created, one thing I would want to point out is when you're looking at the number of sprinklers you calculate per branch line, anytime you get up above 0.49, that's when you round up. So anytime 0.49 or less, you can round down. Anytime you exceed the 0.49.
That's how you're
rounding up
getting,
to
that's how
next.
you're getting up to the,
Yeah, they have their
5
own
on a branch
round-off
line,
factor
right?
in
Round-
FM that's different than NFPA, because when we used to calculate the number of sprinklers per branch line, if it was 31 feet and it was 3.1, you had to go to 4.
Yep.
So anything above a whole number, you had to go to the
Right.
next whole number.
Yeah.
FM changed that and said anything 0.49 or less, so
You could go- you could go
3.49
down.
was 3. 3.51 was 4. So that's their division point, and it really does affect how many sprinklers you have to calculate.
Yeah,
It's a
that's,
great point.
that's, yeah, it's a great point to make, so.
Probably the most significant changes I've seen, I mean, really, since we added a few K factors and a few more ceiling heights, and they were always fill in another box, this one sort of blew up the tables and
Yeah.
changed every box at the same time. And, from my understanding, it's based on the data that FM has, and they're comfortable with it, and that's what they want to ensure to.
Okay.
And it's our job as an industry is to educate to that, tell people what this new design standard is, and figure out where the opportunities are
Sure,
within the new document.
Within the new document.
Because change is good.
Yeah.
I love change. I love providing our customers with the best tools, and right now we have it.
Right.
We have the best tools for it, and we're going to continue down that path.
Great.
Right.
So we've made, just in conclusion, we've made a couple of references, a few references. The whole thing has been based on this technical article that we are going to publish, and it will have a link from the TechTalks page. We will have a link directly to the technical article in support of all of this. So not only can you see it on your screen, but you can follow along at home with reading through the page, the paper itself, so you can follow along. If you have any questions on that, once you've read it, Shaun,
Call
what are
Shaun.
those? Yeah, really, Shaun, what's that number and email address?
Our toll-free number for our technical service line is 877-384-5464. And our technical service email is tech, TECH, SVCS, @vikingcorp.com.
It's great. Well, thanks, guys. This has been a really interesting exploration of the new FMDS 8-9 and all its revisions. So,
Thanks for letting me participate.
oh, yeah, we brought you right
I
in with
didn't
it.
give them an option. I couldn't let this one go by without jumping in,
Just
so
kind of a
thank
favorite
you.
subject of yours. You're welcome anytime. All right, we're out. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.